Hey, yo, it's Megamouth, and today I have a classic video game review, V-Tetris on the Virtual Boy. What score does this one deserve? Well, ultimately, I think most people who have played video games before have played at least some version of Tetris. It's been a classic one since like the mid 1980s on like the original Nintendo Entertainment System. And ultimately, the Virtual Boy, despite the few video games it had that actually released on the system, um, somehow, despite only having about 22 games, I believe it was, Tetris had two different versions on the Virtual Boy, and that is really confounding to really stop and think about that. But there's probably a good reason why, because that first version, I think it was like a 3D Tetris or something like that, where it kind of slowly, the screen would slowly rotate around where you could see like the Tetris field to play, and is this incredibly slow moving isometric, big blocky style. It was a terrible version of Tetris. It is nothing more than a historical curiosity. It is really it's a terrible version of Tetris. So I think because that version was so bad, Nintendo was like, you know what? Let's get the regular version of Tetris and let's release that on the system. That will probably at least sell a little bit better. And ultimately, this game, in terms of gameplay, this is basically just real nice classic Tetris, just in the Virtual Boy's typically awkward red and black color scheme. So is this going to be the best version of Tetris of all time? No, certainly not. But if you had a Virtual Boy back in the 90s and you wanted a real version of Tetris, I think you would actually be pleased by this version. It's so much better than that 3D Tetris version. That one just, yeah, 3D Tetris just terrible. But this one, despite having the weird monochromatic color scheme, red and black only, I would say from a gameplay perspective, this is still, really good. It's nice and fun. It's normal. It's just a regular version of Tetris. And so ultimately, I think that, Nintendo was smart of them to go ahead and release this version. Ultimately, did it help the Virtual Boy? Did it help their sales long term? No, not really. But in terms of being at this point, because there are better versions on the Switch, like Tetris 99, so much better than this version. So this one, ultimately, it is still just a historical curiosity. I can't really recommend it beyond that. But for the Virtual Boy, this was actually a good version of Tetris. And so I would say from a classical video game review score perspective, I would have said that if had I gotten this back on the Virtual Boy in the 1990s, I would have actually enjoyed this one. And then, I'm not the biggest Tetris fan in the world, but I would have said, in terms of the gameplay, in terms of the, technical design of this one, it's worthy of a score, a classical score from back then of at least a 4 out of 5. And from a modern day, review score perspective, this is still just a perfectly fine version of Tetris. So I'll say it would get a score of 3 out of 5, worth at least one playthrough. This is Megamouse signing out. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.